Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our third in a series of webinars on the basis of the Circular Economy Package and the Single-Use Plastics Directive. This is coming out of our Plastic Challenge Working Group, and a lot of you will have seen the launch of our Plastic Pledge report last week. This morning is my pleasure to introduce you to a number of speakers from Europe and in Ireland who will give their understanding of where we stand today with the Single-Use Plastics Directive. I particularly want to welcome all the producers on the call today, also industry. We've also compliance schemes from outside of Ireland here today. I welcome Valpak from the UK, and there's a few in Ireland as well. Throughout the series of speakers this morning, if you have questions, can you please use the Q&A button and put your questions through there. We will respond to you, maybe not today, but definitely over the next few days. And we'll have a short question and answer series at the end of the meeting. We are going to confine it to 1 hour and 5 minutes, no more, because everybody has busy lives, and we want to make sure it's very interesting for you in that period. So first up today is a friend of ours who is the Managing Director of Pro Europe, Ursula Denison. She also has been Head of Strategy for DSD in Germany, one of the biggest compliance schemes, and the original EPR scheme in Germany. Ursula brings a wealth of experience. She's over 30 years working with packaging organizations and compliance schemes. And if there's anybody who knows the inner workings of the European Commission, what they do well and what they don't do so well, and how that translates into local legislation, Ursula is to the foremost. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Ursula, who will give her take on the SUP Packaging Directive and what it means for producers. Welcome, Ursula.
Thank you very much, Seamus, and hello to everybody. Sad I don't get to see you all, so but I'm quite delighted to have the chance to talk to you all and share my views on, and a lot of it is my view, so on what the Single-Use Plastics Directive and other policies of the European Commission mean for producers. After all, we are in the context of just struggling with my screen here a little bit, forgive me, struggling with the implementation of the European Directive, all member states. Can you see my presentation? I somehow have trouble.
Yeah, it's there.
All right.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm not so used to Zoom. Anyway, so I'm going to start. Yes, let's jump right in. I titled it The Impact of the Circular Economy Action Pact and the Single-Use Plastics Directive on Producers. Are you ready for EPR 2.0? Extended producer responsibility is a concept that has been around for 30 years and works. I still think it's the best approach to involving companies and industry in the end of life of the products and packaging that they produce, and makes the best use of the innovation potential that industry has. If we look at just a Google search for images of plastic packaging, brings you a whole wealth of images. I mean, we all know that plastics right now is the bad guy in the public view, also in the view of course, NGOs, environmental associations, and also the Commission. And I think the Commission has noticed that if they use this topic, they get quite a bit of visibility and impact, maybe more so as with other areas of activity, and it's quite popular with consumers. So that's what gives them a lot of energy, a lot of drive in dealing with this issue of plastics, especially plastics packaging. And the Single-Use Plastics Act was based on a study of plastic items found on the shores of European or on European shores, and that basically determined which products were banned during the in the pact and the impacts of other products. If they did the study today, I'm sure they would find a lot of face masks and single gloves, plastic gloves. Now we all agree that these things have been our lifesavers over the last 18 months. So it's always an issue of, a point in time whether plastics are considered more of a threat to humanity or more a material that has a lot of potential. Of course, it needs to be handled responsibly in the end of life. But that's an issue that affects all of us. If you look at the Eurostat data on member state plastic recycling rates, you see that a lot remains to be done. Many countries have basically not been very active in developing their plastics recycling infrastructure to go much above the 22.5% recycling level that we've had up to now. So we see that there's a lot of room for improvement, and rightly so. The focus on plastics basically informs all the initiatives of the European Commission. There's, of course, the Waste Framework Directive, there's the Landfill Directive, the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, which directly addresses the issue of packaging, the Waste Incineration Directive, and then more comprehensive approaches, the Circular Economy Package per se, the Plastic Bag Directive, which I think has been implemented everywhere. Then our favorite, the Single-Use Plastics Directives with bans, labels, and requirements for producer responsibility, and also policies dealing with waste to energy. This is just an overview, and I think you will get the presentation at the end. I'm not going to go through all the points here, but you see that it is an ambitious package of different initiatives. Many of them address similar topics, so it will be interesting to see how they inform each other and how they cooperate or collaborate or cohabitate with each other once implemented. Today we will focus on the Single-Use Plastics Directive and what it means. Basically, what's still the homework of the Commission are the guidelines on definitions, what packagings and products are affected, the guidelines on producer responsibility for littering. That's also something coming down the pipe. Guidelines on labeling requirements. We already have some of those in effect. The calculation methodology for packaging reduction targets. That's a challenging topic that they're working on, and a standard on the tethered cap for beverage packaging that is also coming down the pipe. If you look at the Single-Use Plastics Directive timeline, I'm now focusing just on the main points. As of 2021, and July 3rd has just passed, where the first regulations or first parts of the directive were implemented nationally, I think in Ireland as well as in Germany and many other member states. You have the clear prohibition of plastic disposable dishes made of EPS, plastic cutlery and plates, of straws, cotton swabs made of plastic, and oxidegradable plastics. And frankly, on the last point, I was quite happy to see that they focused on oxidegradables, because they were really not recyclable and more of a challenge or more of a threat than beneficial. So to go back, the first draft of the Single-Use Plastics Directive, I think, was from 2018. When I read the draft, I laughed out aloud. I thought, oh my God, they're really, I mean, I'm being very open here, they're going crazy to, really go in and affect markets, affect single products based on a study that had limited scope, was quite revolutionary. And I thought, they're never going to get this through. The opposite happened, because plastics is such a hot topic for discussion, and everybody's getting upset about it. It's very visible. The directive got harder or more challenging as it progressed through the different stages, rather than getting softened up. So this, for me, is a clear warning sign. Let's not underestimate the ambition and the drive of the EU Commission with regard to environmental policies. And let's get involved and make ourselves heard. Absolutely with the responsibility of taking care of the plastic issue, but maybe with a more informed approach than seems to be sometimes the case. 2021 already brings us the SUP labeling directive, my favorite, the dead turtle. I don't know whether you've looked into the requirements for the labeling, but it is quite ambitious, again, to prescribe very graphic labels for products containing plastics. Also, the labeling has to be in the member states' mother tongue, so to say. So the whole issue of labeling for national markets comes into play. That's going to be quite a challenge. Next step here is 2023, the responsibility of manufacturers to cover the littering costs for example, tobacco filters, wet wipes, sanitary items, etc. That gives producer responsibility a new frontier. Up to now, it has been the responsibility to participate in a compliance scheme, in a PRO like Repak or like DSD. And the PRO's job was to collect, sort, and recycle according to the targets that were written in the national legislation. The responsibility for littering costs means that producers of those items have to pay municipalities for the cost of collection and processing. I don't think a lot of recycling is going to be going on with those materials, but it basically adds an extra cost item to your line, and not with a lot of ability to influence the cost management of municipalities. That's something where I would have a problem with. You're not sitting down to negotiate with the municipality how much they can charge you for removing a tobacco filter. Basically, they will dictate the level of cost that they want for their job of cleaning up the environment. Of course, you can always say the consumer is responsible. The consumer shouldn't be littering, and it cannot be put on industry if the consumer behaves badly. But in this case, we have lost that fight. So we're just going to have to see how we manage the negotiations with the municipalities to come to some level of transparency and cost cost control. 2024 will bring the tethered caps on beverage containers. That's also going to be interesting to see how that will be implemented. 2025, then a minimum recycled content for PET beverage bottles with 25% minimum content. We already see major players in the market saying 25% is not enough. I will go for 100%. So there is already a battle raging for access to recycled PET. And if you look at the prices these days, recycled PET is more expensive than virgin PET. That's the market mechanisms at work. I would think that this is going to get more pronounced as time goes on. 2025, you will have a 77% collection target for recycling of beverage bottles. And 2030 is the final step, well, up to now, the final step, that sees 30% minimum recycled content for all plastic beverage containers, not only PET bottles, and a 90% collection target for recycling beverage bottles. And my personal opinion is there may be exemptions, but that means basically a direct a deposit return system for most beverages all over Europe. That will have an impact on the existing compliance schemes and the cost. I will not go into this in detail. That's just an overview on these specific targets in the different initiatives, the Packaging Waste Directive, the single-use plastics, the plastic strategy, etc. So you can read up on that in the follow-up. My appeal is, and my suggestion, I have mentioned already the tool of extended producer responsibility. My understanding of extended producer responsibility is not only paying for the impact of packaging and products on the environment, but actually getting involved in the process. Sit at the table, see what contribution you could make, say yes to your responsibility, because it's going to get you anyway. If you don't sit at the table, you may be on the table, just being charged with all kinds of obligations and costs. So I think this the role that producers and retailers play in being part of this extended producer responsibility ecosystem is a very essential one. So that would be my invitation to take that role seriously and get involved. What still needs to be worked on, I think this part of EPR, the financing of the system, the information of the consumer and collection from consumer households, collection and sorting and trading of materials and even recycling have been built up significantly over the last 30 years. Where we still have a lot of work to do is to really close the plastics loop and to use the materials from the household collection to produce recyclates, to really close the loop, to not only go into downcycling, but to find applications that really get from shelf to shelf. Turn the shampoo bottle back into a shampoo or a detergent bottle. And find better solutions in this field. I think there's still a lot of potential there. EPR is already stands for Extended Producer Responsibility, making producers responsible for the end-of-life management of their packaging. The question is, how far do you extend this responsibility? We look at the so-called Brexit tax on non-recycled plastic packaging that right now, at least for Germany, is being paid out of the government budget to Brussels. It's 1.4 billion euros a year. They could also turn this over and say, okay, we're going to just charge producers that have non-recyclable packaging an extra 800 euros per ton for the packaging that they are putting on the market that cannot be recycled. So there's a lot of potential looming there. The littering cost I already talked about. The estimate for Germany there is 700 million euros a year. And if we also look at the issue of eco-modulation, I understand that you already had a seminar on that. There, the idea is to have a malus for packaging that cannot be recycled maybe adding up to 200 to 500 million euros a year. The current cost of the system in Germany, at least, is about 1.3 billion euros. So basically, you add almost twice as that. With the new initiatives extending producer responsibility even more. That's a significant cost point. What is encouraging to see is that the packaging value chain is getting more active, is getting more involved. There's a lot of initiatives and common platforms for exchange of best practice of technology. You have Holy Grail with the marking technology for better sorting. You have CFlex to find answers to the challenging issues of recycling flexible packaging. You have initiatives on better fiber recycling. We all know that the switch from plastics to fiber-based packaging will also pose challenges for recycling. We have initiatives on glass recycling, close the glass loop, that is also working on a field, on a material that already has a lot of good solutions to recycling, but still their improvement is still possible. So take a deep breath and get ready for what will be coming down the pipe. There will be the revision of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive in 22-23. There will be essential requirements to define recyclability and to make sure that only reusable or recyclable packaging is put on the market by 2030. And 2030 will come sooner than you think. There will definitely be additional recycled content targets, minimum recycled content for additional packaging, for example, detergent bottles, any kind of non-food packaging where using recyclates is not such an issue as with food, etc. There will be a definition on chemical recycling, what will be maybe accepted as material recycling through the chemical process, pyrolysis, etc. There will definitely also be restrictions on exporting plastic waste, and I would say rightly so. We have to find our own answers, at least in the common market, to deal with most of the plastics that we consume, and be a lot stricter about requirements for exporting plastic waste. An issue that I find difficult is the topic of prevention of materials. Of course, that is very high in the waste hierarchy. I find it difficult to manage or to measure. So it'll be interesting to see those discussions on how you can incentivize packaging prevention. Another big issue that's already hitting us right now is the whole issue of labeling, of harmonization. You have different labeling requirements, for example, in France that are coming down the pipe, in Italy. So I would be very careful, and Ireland as an island knows what that means. I would be very careful in going down the path of national marking requirements that would unfailingly hinder the free movement of goods in the internal market. I think we need to come to more intelligent solutions with regard to labeling for recyclability, for sorting, or for recycled content. I'm really hoping that the Commission will come to good guidance on that area in order to protect the internal market. And of course, the issue of fee modulation, also there we can use a harmonized approach. That's something we're working on very diligently. So my call to action would be to the material producers, design for circularity. I think the days where marketing gets the last say in whether a packaging is black and thus non-recyclable, or dark gray and maybe recyclable, should be over. I think it's more important for the other for sustainability people or engineers, packaging engineers, to have their say and to say, okay, recyclability is really should be our final call. Packaging producers, same thing, design for recycling and find solutions to integrate post-consumer recyclates. I think that's a big issue that takes a long time, but is something we need to start now in order to be ready when the regulation comes. The consumer goods industry should see packaging sustainability as an advantage. It will be cheaper to have recyclable packaging than non-recyclable packaging, and we already see in the feedback from consumers that is an issue that they value, and they will choose recyclable packaging over non-recyclable packaging. And the recycling industry, of course, be open to innovation and cooperation. Don't always cling to what used to be, but try and strive for new answers to new challenges. I think that's what makes circularity possible. So my appeal to everybody is, get to the table, talk, exchange, and say yes to the challenges that will be coming down the pipe from Brussels. So thank you.
Ursula, thank you very much for a very informative talk to us this morning. You've given us an awful lot of food for thought, from consumer demands to political visibility of what's nice to have rather than need to have. Telling us to please don't underestimate the ambition. Get to the table, please, and deliver what needs to be done. The whole harmonization of labeling across Europe. You referenced the fact it needs to be an intelligent solution. So I take it from that you currently don't believe it's that intelligent, and it needs to move to another level based on guidance.
I'm being polite.
Yes, how far does extended producer responsibility go? How much does where does it stop? Where producers have to pick up the tab? And the call to action, I think, to all from material producers to actually everything else that goes with this. We all have a part to play, and we need to move on. I think and this leads nicely into the next speaker, is Brian Walsh, our expert and guru in-house, who has actually, Ursula has given the lead in that he's no longer going to be ignored by the marketeers, but will actually play a more integral part in materials usage and design. Brian is our lead. He is the author of the Plastic Pledge report. He is the author of the design guide within the membership division of Repak. I really welcome Brian this morning because he has put a huge amount of work into this, understands the intricacy of design and the necessity of what is required for us all going forward. So without further ado, our own Brian Walsh.
Thank you very much, James, and morning, everybody. Just my compliments to Ursula on a very interesting presentation there as well. Before I start into this year's report, just like to very quickly remind everyone of the key objectives and initiatives associated with the Plastic Pledge. So the Plastic Pledge itself has 5 main objectives. Number 1 is really about preventing avoidable plastic packaging waste and promoting reuse. So this can be done through a number of different methods, whether that be lightweighting, reducing pack dimensions, eliminating avoidable materials completely, or implementing well-managed returnable systems. Number 2 is about businesses helping to increase plastic recycling rates through their own on-site waste management activities, as well as through staff and consumer education. So things like on-pack labeling obviously play a big part in that. The third one is about simplifying plastics, and obviously we mentioned fee modulation, and fee modulation really is concentrating on the non-recyclable or the more complex plastics that can't be dealt with currently through the system. And we'll hear a little bit more as well from Ciara Carolan later on in ADN Materials, who's going to talk to us about some of the challenges faced by the industry in dealing with some of that current packaging design. Number 4 is about stimulating the market for plastics, really, and this goes back to this whole area of recycled content. So by giving recycled plastics more outlets to go to, we help to ensure that more of it can actually be recycled. So we'll hear a little bit more from Sian Young in a moment about the great work Britvic have been doing on their Ballygown water brand around this, and some other areas also. And the 5th one really is about recognizing that plastic plays an important role in maintaining or increasing shelf life. And therefore, we must ensure that we don't end up with unintended consequences as a result of the work that we do to reduce or eliminate plastic packaging. In terms of the plastic pledge itself, there's a number of ways that we are bringing that to life. Seamus already mentioned the Plastic Challenge Working Group. So by collaborating with partners, stakeholders, and also signatories of the pledge, we're helping to shape the way in which we address the plastic challenge. And we hold quarterly working group meetings that any member who's signed up to the pledge is more than welcome to join. It's also about highlighting achievements. So just, as we say, published our 3rd report. And again, that shows well in excess of 200 case studies that show significant levels of achievement in this particular area. And again, other businesses can take learnings from those and can potentially adopt some of the work if it's relevant to their business. We're also supporting our members through our packaging optimization and design scheme known as Prevent and Save. So that involves packaging site surveys or virtual workshops. And those virtual workshops or site surveys can concentrate specifically on certain types of packaging, such as plastics or other materials. We'll also be updating the packaging design guide mentioned by Seamus in the near future. So that will include some further guidance around designing for recycling for soft plastics. And the other thing to remember is that we, on an annual basis, hold our Packman Awards ceremony, and Packman Awards ceremony includes a category in relation to the plastic pledge. So again, any signatory to the pledge is entitled to submit an entry for an award. Before I discuss the report in detail, I would also like to say a big thanks to all the members, partners and stakeholders that have contributed to our progress report or that have been involved in that Plastic Pledge Working Group. So only those members that have contributed are shown here. However, again, if you want to see a full list of those signed up to the pledge, you can find that on our website at Repak.ie. So just very quickly run through some of the highlights about what the report is telling us for what has been going on in the last year. So based on what our members have reported to us around our first objective, we have seen over 23,000 tonnes of plastic packaging waste reduced or replaced since 2018 when we started doing this report. Average reductions are very significant across the board. We're seeing an average of 18.6% plastic packaging either reduced or replaced again. We've also seen over 55 million avoidable plastic items removed. Many of those items would have included items that are now banned under the SUP directive. So again, they will not count towards the report last year because it's no longer optional. We've also seen average recycling rates for plastic packaging recycled at business premises reported at around 67%. We've seen great engagement with staff around Repak's own Team Green initiative, which is encouraging consumers to recycle more plastic. And we've also seen the increased use of on-pack labeling as a means to educate consumers. In terms of Objective 3, what we're seeing is that many have taken positive steps to either eliminate complex or difficult to recycle plastics where this is possible. So for example, we're seeing a lot of companies that have now come up with red or do not use lists, which they use with their suppliers in order to ensure that they get the most recyclable plastic packaging possible. And we've also seen one particular packaging supplier exit the carbon black market completely for black plastic packaging, which is a wonderful achievement, meaning that all of the black plastic trays that they place on the market are all now detectable. And we've seen companies making significant strides in eliminating non-recyclable plastic packaging. One food supplier eliminating 69% of all of the non-recyclable plastic packaging that they were placing on the market. Average recycled content was reported for projects, and I stress for projects doesn't mean that's the national figure, but that was for 54%. And we've also seen an average amongst beverage PET bottle projects at 36.5%. Again, a very good sign when you're looking at a target of 30% for 2030. We've seen one business remove over 2,000 tons of virgin plastic during 2020 alone, moving to plastic with recycled content. And lastly, due diligence continues to ensure that plastic packaging is reduced in a manner that is not increasing food waste. And we've seen a number of businesses during 2020 sign up to the Environmental Protection Agency's Food Waste Charter. Also, where I suppose it's inevitable that product cannot be sold, we've seen over 4.1 million meals donated to Food Cloud, which are a fantastic charity operating here in Ireland, to ensure that short dated stock goes to charities rather than into waste stream. Just some opportunities in this area. If you're doing great work, please tell us about it, and we can include it in our reports. It's important that we also get key figures, for example, tonnages reduced or percentages recycled content, because we want to ensure that we're not underestimating the achievements of our members out there. Consistency of reporting is also important to understand that accumulated achievements. So our template for the report last year included the way in which we would like to see each objective reported. So it's important that we follow that as closely as possible. Well-managed reusable and returnable packaging systems has also not been a big feature of the report up to now. So as a significant circular economy opportunity, we would like to see more of that if possible. And also feel free to put in the chat what further supports and initiatives you would like to see under the Repak Members Plastic Pledge. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And just to remind you, if anybody wants to ask questions for Ursula or Brian, please put it on the Q&A and we'll get back to you. And I suppose the overriding message there is there's a lot of work done in the Plastic Pledge. There's a lot more to do. We'd like to see, even though we have 145 businesses signed up to the Plastic Pledge, not everybody is traveling on the train tracks at the same level of impact. And we'd like to see a significant improvement on that. We're seeing major responses from those that have engaged in the Plastic Pledge report who are listed there, but there are many more who actually need to up their game. And as Ursula said earlier, we all need to come to the table and be part of that table. So moving on, I'm going to introduce you to Sian Price. Sian is head of People and Planet at Britvic Ireland and responsible also for the Ballygowan group within that. Very interesting title, as Sian has come from the sustainability side of the business, but what that means is she's responsible for implementing global sustainability strategy at a local level. And no better person, because she's been working in sustainability for quite a number of years, and her baseline qualification is from Oxford in experimental psychology. So if there's anybody who needs to understand what the consumer wants, I'll hand you over to Sian and the good work they're doing in Ballygowan.
Thank you, Seamus. That's a great intro there. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to everyone today. I just want to, that's my presentation. So what I wanted to talk about today is the work that we've been doing on Ballygowan in particular at Britvic. And we've very much been on a journey over the course of the last 3 years. And I say I've very much been on a journey in the last 3 years. We started out, at the time I was managing Ballygowan as marketing manager, and it was very much a brand where we felt that sustainability was important. We were very enthusiastic supporters, and there was a lot of passion to deliver around this. We were working a lot with Repak, and we were big supporters of Team Green. But we had lots of silos of great activity, but we realized as a business, we didn't have a clear vision of the future. We didn't know what the future of sustainability looked like. And we knew it was very important. We knew that plastic in particular was a major challenge that we needed to face into. And I was given the opportunity to take a step back and have a secondment to specifically look at a project of how we were going to make the Ballygowan brand more sustainable. What did sustainability mean for us? And how were we going to get to the future view and bring the brand forward? I was delighted with the opportunity because it was a really interesting project. It was a really challenging and an important project. And if I'm absolutely honest, I kind of thought it was going to be easy, because we all know that Ballygowan's a great product. It's natural. You know, that we're really doing very little wrong. The only problem is that it comes in a plastic bottle. So I pulled together a big brainstorm, and I brought together about 20 people, all the best and the brightest in our technical and our packaging and our innovation teams and our insight teams. And I sat down and we said, okay, right, we're talking about the future of Ballygowan. Where's Ballygowan going to be in the next 10 years? You know, what are we going to be packaging it in that isn't a plastic bottle? What's the future of packaging formats? And to my surprise, I was faced with a room full of slightly puzzled faces, and eventually someone piped up, but if we want to be more sustainable, why are we talking about just getting rid of plastic bottles? And I learned an important lesson today, which was that this wasn't going to be as easy as I thought, that sustainability is complex, and that actually plastic packaging can have sustainability benefits. There's very much a received wisdom that you know, that plastic is this evil substance, we just need to get rid of it. But the reality is, when you look at an overall environmental footprint, there are definitely benefits there. So to explain it to me, they shared a piece of work that we'd done looking at the LCA, the life cycle analysis of packaging within our system. So whereby we knew exactly where it was coming from, how it had been transported, how it was produced. And what we found was actually PET in itself, when you look at the overall environmental footprint, definitely had some benefits there. It's light, it's easy to work with, it doesn't use a lot of energy. You know, in the early stages of production, you're able to transport a preform rather than a big empty bottle. So when we compared it to, you know, our glass bottles or aluminium cans, it actually had a relatively favorable footprint, particularly compared to glass, which is very heavy, which uses a lot of water and is very energy intensive. Actually, PET stands up quite well. It's a good product. As I say, it's light, it's got a relatively low footprint and water footprint compared to other materials. And really, the big issue with it is when it leaves the system, is when it becomes waste, because that's when it can pollute, that's when it can cause problems. But actually, a good sustainability strategy will recognize all the elements of the packaging, will consider the full impacts on the environment. So we need to think very carefully in terms of the changes that we make sure that we're making the right choices to look at the environment as a whole. So there is no point going from plastic into something which has a huge carbon footprint, which is then going to contribute to climate change. So it was certainly eye-opening for me, and it's been really interesting in terms of seeing how we then bring this forward and drive a packaging strategy which doesn't alienate plastic. I'm not saying it's perfect, but certainly which looks at it in a balanced view. So a balanced approach to tackling the problem of waste in particular, this will be familiar to anyone who's sort of working in the packaging area, is really all around prioritizing prevention, then reuse, then recycling, and then you have recovery, disposal, and littering, which are all the elements we want to avoid. It's all about keeping packaging in the economy, reusing it, and out of the environment where it might be doing harm. So at Britvic, this helps me to make sense overall of the big goals that we've got as a business, which look at all areas of sustainability. And I'm lucky to work in a business where we really do prioritize sustainability. People and planet are up there in the same way that we track performance from financial metrics, and we've set some really big goals in terms by the end of 2025 around all areas of sustainability. So we want to reduce our direct carbon emissions by 50%, and from a packaging perspective, we want to be in fully recyclable and over 50% recycled PET for our bottles. And alongside that, we also have a really big target around reducing packaging per serve. So making sure that we are getting rid of packaging where we don't need it, reducing it and only using the materials we really need to, and making sure that those materials we use are fully recyclable, and making sure that they're used of recycled content as well. And this fits within an overall view of sustainability, which contains the people elements, the product elements, healthier consumer choices, but really critically supporting a packaging circular economy. And what does this actually look like in terms of those targets? How do we go about it? And it really goes back to that sort of packaging strategy of reduce, reuse, recycle. We have reframe and reinvent, which we've put in there as well. So overall, as a business, the way we're going about this is we're looking first and foremost to reduce and minimize packaging waste per serve, getting rid of unnecessary packaging and unnecessary materials we don't need, while ensuring there's no compromise on quality or safety, because we don't want to be contributing to food waste by making a change as an unintended consequence, and making sure that we're looking at our factory waste and you know, things like that, making sure that those are being recycled, that we're not contributing to the waste issue there. From a recycle perspective, making sure that from the start we're designing packaging which is fully and easily recyclable or reusable, step changing our use of those recycled materials, so closing the loop, using our packaging, and enthusiastically supporting proven measures to improve recycling rates. As Ursula pointed out earlier, recycled materials are actually more expensive than virgin these days. And the best way that we can tackle that as an industry is to make sure we're getting our materials back, because it could become supply and demand. The more that we have in the system, the more cost effective and economically viable circularity becomes. Reframing was a nice R to basically say educate, but it's really all about, it's very important that we engage everyone, all stakeholders to proactively create a circular economy. Let's be clear, no business is going to get here by ourselves. The only way we're going to create this transformational change is by all working together. If we're all pulling in the same direction, be that industry, the NGO system, all of the waste system, and government as well. And we need to be going in that direction to make sure we have the right infrastructure in place to create that circular economy. And then on a business perspective, using the scale and reach of our brands, where we know we have a big voice, to get the island of Ireland recycling and make sure that we're closing the loop. And then finally, you know, that always having to have that eye on the future, because this journey is never going to be complete. There's always going to be the next step in the journey. So how do we make sure that we're looking to the future to innovate in low and zero packaging solutions? How do we make sure that we're innovating in packaging materials which have a reduced impact on the environment, but making sure as we go along that we're not having unintended negative consequences. So really doing our homework as we go along to make sure that we're doing the right things, not just from a perception and looking good, but actually making sure we're doing the right things for the environment as well. Now, this is, whenever I sort of see that, it's a lot of words on a page. What does it look like in reality? And we took this sort of vision and we started making steps, and we looked at all areas of the brand. What does this mean? What can we do in this area? And it really comes to life when I sort of show the steps that we've taken on Ballygown over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, and how we've been able to make progress against each of these different areas. So with reduce, you know, it's a big challenge to reduce packaging weights. You know, there's a reason, you know, we're a business. We don't have deliberately heavy packaging because from an economic perspective, it's the right thing to do is to be out of it. But we realized that there was one area on Ballygown, we had a load of plastic, which we actually didn't need. And that was within water cooler, where we were distributing millions of plastic cups for people to consume. Our Ballygown, which was in this brilliant circular system, a big plastic bottle, which was being reused, but then we were creating unnecessary plastic with our plastic cups. So we did a trial where we brought in compostable paper cups, and they're expensive. We had to charge a little bit more for them. The trial was such an overwhelming success. Within 3 months, we realized we could actually take plastic cups out altogether. And that was a move that we made. So we went out there, we removed all of our plastic cups, we replaced them with compostable paper cups, really well received with our customers. But then we also took the extra step of, well, do we really need to have paper cups? So that 11 million doesn't represent the number of cups we were actually using. We reduced the number of cups by also offering refillable sports bottles to our customers. So really looking at where's the unnecessary plastic, how do we take that out? While also working on our weights per serve, on our tertiary packaging, and looking at any elements that we could take plastic out. From a recycle perspective, you know, no spoilers, you're aware that we've gone to 100% recycled PET, but we knew that was going to take time. The first step, however, was to get our consumers recycling, and was to make sure that people understood, that people knew that our bottles were recyclable. So we did an awful lot of work in terms of putting prompts on our packaging to remind people to recycle this, to make sure that they knew the bottles were fully recyclable. And we put a really big flash on the front of the bottle to make sure that people knew this is a fully recyclable bottle. Please make sure that it finds its way into the recycling. And we also celebrated our membership of Team Green there as well, to try and encourage consumers to look it up online and to get involved themselves. In terms of education, it was really a matter of using all of the points. So using our packaging as a point, but also using our comms, using our digital strategy, using our big footprint, the materials that we use in store, the materials that we use in our food service outlets, again, to constantly have that prompt to people to get them into the habit of recycling our bottles. And from a sort of beyond the bottle perspective, we actually already have a great solution there in terms of we have our refillable water bottles. It's a fully closed loop system. There are bottles, we send them out, we bring them back, they get refilled at least 40 times. They're very robust bottles. Some of those bottles I think have been in Britvic longer than I have, and I've been here 15 years. But yeah, so we have that system, but really looking at where we could take that next, and making sure we were making the most of that. But while all this was going on, this was all I say small stuff, this was small stuff which was stacking up to make a really big difference in many ways. But it was all while we were working in the background to get to a place where, given that I now understood that simply taking the plastic bottle out of Ballygown wasn't going to be an obvious answer, we were looking at how could we optimize our plastic packaging. So if we need to be in plastic for now, then what exactly does the ideal Ballygown plastic bottle look like? And over the course of 2 years, we got there, and this was launched. So we ceased all production in Newcastle West in December last year, and went into production at the start of January with our new bottles. Now, these bottles are made from 100% recycled PET, and our PET is expensive. So what we've managed to do is create lighter, well-designed bottles which perform just as well as our old bottles, but we're using the recycled content. So how did we get there? Some of it was through design. So working with the right packaging agency, you can build elements in which will make the bottle stronger and perform better, even when you're moving from virgin to recycled content. A small thing, changing the height of the neck, very complicated thing to do, but that automatically takes weight out. And it also means that we're ready for tethered caps when we're ready to put them on, because obviously that legislation is coming down the line. We made sure that our labels at the time, they were made of metal substrate, a sort of metallic paper. We've moved that to a plain paper. The metallic paper was recyclable, but not as recyclable as plain paper when we're actually looking to get recycled content into that paper as well. And then also putting recycling cues throughout the design. Now, this may seem like a small thing to many, but anyone who's worked in marketing, this was a really big move for us. We used to have a Ballygown B logo on the bottle, and we've replaced, rather than having the B and the Ballygown branding, we replaced that with the Mobius loop. So making sure that on the cap, on the bottle, on the label, anywhere you look, you're constantly getting the prompts to recycle, to make sure that this is a bottle which is as sustainable as we can make it at the moment, and that we get that prompt to get the consumer recycling it. I'm not going to go through all the detail, but the point here is really around, it's part of a cohesive plan. So it's not just about reducing plastic. It's all about making sure that we are a more sustainable water brand. So getting rid of virgin plastic, lightweighting to get rid of plastic tonnage overall, because even when it's our pet, we'd rather be using less of it, but also contributing to a reduced carbon footprint, and making sure that we're using renewable electricity, that there's no waste there. And as I say, bringing it together as an overall plan, and then sharing that plan and taking the responsibility to talk to our consumers. Because I think the biggest thing that we cannot forget, and the biggest responsibility of brand owners, is we can go out there and we can do the right things with our packaging, but if we're not getting our bottles back, then effectively it is wasted effort. The last thing we can afford is for those bottles to go to the wrong place, or even worse, be littered. We want to make sure they're finding their way into the green bin, and that we're getting them back to make into more plastic bottles. So we have a really big sort of program of education using all points of the brand. So whether that's our TV advertising, working on social media and working with influencers who have an interest in sustainability and can understand and can explain what we're doing. I even got dragged onto RTE to talk about recycling on the Today program. I thought at the time, a segment on how you should recycle your packaging, how interesting is that going to be? They actually got a great response, because there's a real hunger for knowledge. People are quite intimidated by sustainability. They're not quite sure what the right thing to do is, and they don't want to admit that they don't know, because then you look like someone like, oh, are you not recycling already? Do you not know what you're doing? So actually getting out there and giving people basic tips like put the cap back on your bottle. It really engages with people, and it's all part of building this momentum to close the loop and create a truly circular system. So just to sort of wrap up and hopefully just talking you through, our journey over the last 2.5, 3 years has been helpful for anyone who's working in industry and is looking at what you want to be doing with your packaging, or for other sort of partners within the waste industry who are working with businesses, and just to give you some advice in terms of how we've got there and some of the key learnings and the key tips that I'd give on how to get there. First things first is to get senior buy-in and commitment to investing in sustainability from the start. This sustainability and plastic reduction, it can be expensive. The investment in that line, which you can see running beautifully there, like that was a €2 million investment in the factory. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. And by making sure that upfront the senior management team understood this is something we have to do, this is the right thing to do, and you're going to have to allocate human resource, you may have to allocate quite a lot of financial resource, and this is what's coming at you. And it really helps when you then go into a room with a big business case to actually get that investment away. We need to make sure that senior management understand the need for it and that they're committed to it from the start. Do your homework. The answers won't always be obvious. I thought the answers were going to be obvious, and they're not. Make sure you're looking at the full environmental footprint. There are various tools you can use to help you to assess the full environmental footprint, and get external help if necessary. There's plenty of companies which will help you with looking at your environmental footprint and help you with making those right decisions. And on that subject, definitely work with experts in the area to deliver win-win solutions. So when we were looking at redesigning the bottle, we spoke to a few different packaging design agencies, and everyone told us they could do a lightweight bottle and that they knew all about sustainability. It became obvious quite quickly the difference between the people who really knew what they were doing, who were able to give us hints and tips which really delivered on that lightweighting objective. The start of the project, I was told it was impossible to lightweight and go to rPET. We made it to 100% rPET and on average 20% lighter bottles, but it was through taking advice from the right people. And again, I'd recommend talking to Repak. There's huge amount of expertise there. It's available to you, and do talk to the team, because along the journey and a lot of the projects we've done along the way has been with the support of Repak, looking at our packaging footprint and telling us, actually, you know what, you could take this out there, and really knowing where to pinpoint. Set realistic timelines. You're working with new technology. It's going to take a long time. There's a lot of testing. There's a lot of effort involved. And start making small changes today. So don't let the big stuff and how difficult the big stuff is to get in your way. I showed you some of the really small steps we took along the way and how those really stacked up. Think about your consumers and how you're bringing them on the journey with you, because there's no point having packaging which is recyclable if it doesn't get recycled. And finally, always keep an eye on the future. This isn't an endpoint for us. This is really great progress, which we're really proud of, and it's really well in line with our plastic pledge commitments, but we're not stopping here. So we're now looking at, you know, what are the next steps we're taking? How do we roll these learnings out across our wider portfolio? So make sure that you're always understanding that, you know, what's the next step going to be? Always have your eye on the future, because this area is evolving so quickly, and there's a lot to there's a lot to learn still. And that's me. Thank you very much for your time.
Sian, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I think really what stands out for me just listening to you is that when you have a mission and a strategy that's supported by the board and senior management that will put the people and the resource, financial resource behind it, and somebody like yourself within the organization who has got the passion and the purpose to deliver, things can happen, differences can be made. And as you said earlier on there, where there's a hunger for knowledge and making sure the consumer understands that a lot of things are very possible. So your contribution today to the forefront in relation to that, thank you very much. And I suppose from you producing the bottle, and it's probably good for Brian as well to hear the design input and our own team as well. They're now playing a key role in every aspect of design for our members, and we'd like to see more of that. So here we are, we have dealt with legislation, we've dealt with actually the plastic strategy, we've dealt with what Sian and Ballygowan are doing in the market, and now we're going to move on to Ciara Carolan, who ends up taking the next part of the loop in closing it of the products that are placed on the market and what they have to deal with. Ciara is the director in ADN Materials based in Monaghan. They do a great job. They're always innovating, but they've also got to deal with what are the difficult elements of taking what in effect is plastic packaging waste and then trying to transform that back into a flake and into a pellet. I'm going to hand you over to Ciara, who will take you through the very essence of what makes a difference for them in relation to the products and materials they receive in. Welcome, Ciara.
Thanks, Seamus. Can everyone hear me yet?
Yeah, all good.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, Seamus said, my name is Ciara Carolan and I'm co-owner of ADN Materials. So, we set up in 2011 to recycle all types of plastics, packaging waste, our LDPE films, pipe, HDPE, all types of plastic. The process that we use is quite heavy industrial, so all plastics are shredded, they're granulated, everything's washed as well, and then we extrude the plastic. So we end up making an end of waste pellet. We got our end of waste license last year, which means that anything we produce is no longer a waste when leaving our premises. So that's obviously a huge benefit to any companies who want to get their plastics recycled. We sell our products out to a number of countries. We sell to our own country in Ireland, we sell to the UK, Italy, Turkey, and in recent months actually we're selling now as well to China. The the products are generally made, they go to make plastic bags, they go to make a lot of profiles. So your decking out in your back garden, picnic benches, stuff like that as well. So there is quite a large demand on a recycled pellet. But the problems we're seeing at the minute is the consumer or our customers are looking for a much higher quality pellet now, rather than maybe what used to be maybe less of a quality. The majority of the products that we recycle is LDP films. So your backdoor production waste, we do an awful lot of agricultural films, so the farm film, and actually crop cover as well. So farmers who grow crops, we take their crop cover in. We do as well a lot of polypropylene and polystyrene products. So punnets, plastic containers, buckets, things like that. We recycle that. We send some of that actually back to the customer. So we will take in their product, we will recycle it into a pellet and send it back, and they will make more of the same product. The same with HDP pipe grade. We do put some of it out on the market, but the majority of it is actually sent back to the customer again to make more of that product type. Back in 2011, we did do an awful lot more packaging waste, where we would buy in, we say, film that would need sorting, stuff like that. But we found that the amount of contamination in it, the amount of laminates in it, stuff like that, just was causing so much problems. When we recycle a product and we wash it, obviously there's a sink float mechanism there, and a lot of the laminates and things like that that were in that material were floating on with the good material, the LDPEs, which was rendering the product unusable by the end customer. That has improved a lot, especially with backdoor waste from companies themselves, that they're learning what products need to be sorted with what, which is making life an awful lot easier for us. The problems faced with recycling of plastic, so that we're facing, is that we find that once there's two plastic types attached to each other at all in any type of packaging, in the majority of cases it's problematic. It's problematic in washing it. It's problematic as well, even the pre-sorting before we shred or wash, because a lot of the time it's very hard to identify one product from the other if they are able to be separated at all, and it's also quite costly. And that's why in recent years we've really changed our business focus to doing backdoor LDPE and agricultural, because there's less sorting on it, and we can guarantee the customer a standard and a quality, and it's in higher quantities. The reason as well that we've reduced other plastic types, such as our PP or our polypropylene and stuff like that, is that we do an awful lot of tubs, containers, and all that sort of stuff with polypropylene. And we've found that in recent times, an awful lot of PET packaging has been added in. So where the client who is using these products is getting in their PP punnets, they're also getting in their PET punnets. But by the time they get to the end of their process and into the stage where we're collecting that product for recycling, they're all mixed up. And it's extremely hard for us at that stage to go and have to sort it, put the manpower on it and everything to do that. So we do try and work with other recycling companies who would have the infrastructure to sort that by sinking and floating that. But obviously there's a cost added to additional manufacturing when you're trying to sort products. And that's really the main reason we do the LDPE, is because we have found that it is so hard with some plastic packaging to just separate them into one material type and another. And ideally, I know it's not always possible, but ideally, that is why, as a recycler, it would be much easier if packaging was all of the one packaging type. And off an LDPE or off a PP, because then it is fully recyclable and can be recycled into an end of waste product. So when it is sent to us, you no longer have to worry about where's my material gone, has it been recycled, did it go to another country to be recycled? When it gets to us, it's fully recycled and it's an end of waste at the end of the system. It's actually not dirt that, you know, in the material that causes a major problem for us in our process. We can get all that out. It is that there is different plastic types in there and they cause major issues. What our end customer requirements are in quality. So when we take a client's material in, it's important maybe for you to know what the end customer on our side want. So the end customer is making a plastic bag, they're making profile, they could be making a bucket, they could be making pipe. But the most important thing they need to know is that the material is all of one quality, one type, and that there is actually a data spec sheet with it. They really want to know their MFIs, they want to know, you know, what is the melt flow of the material, will it be consistent all the time? And that is where the recycle it is going in the whole world. They want their quality, they want to recycle it at a standard of nearly virgin now. So for that to happen and for loops to close within plastic packaging is going to have to be of the one type to close that and make it a circular economy. As each customer is making their own specific products, they do require consistency, they do require a steady supply. If the material is mixed, that it can cause huge problems in their production system, that they could be down for a couple of days cleaning the machine, or maybe it would actually break screens, that they have huge issues with that. So what I'm saying is that there is a huge demand for recyclable product, and we have massive capacity that we can't fill because we can't get the material in the door of the quality that we need because it is so mixed. So what I'm saying is that there's a huge potential to close the loop. There's a huge potential to get all packaging recycled within our own country, but we need to maybe look further at what can be done to make all these plastic packaging products all of the one material type. So that's it. Just like, thank you, I'm done. And if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ciara. Just before, if any questions want to come in the Q&A, there are a few that we'll respond to on the chat line already. But first and foremost, thank you very much, Ciara. It's very clear. Congratulations on having the end of waste criteria approval from the EPA. That, for all our producers and designers out there, is critical as part of closing the circular economy loop. Because without that, Ciara would still be dealing with the waste as an end product. And this is something to encourage investment in Ireland that we need to see more of. But I think the overriding messaging is from Ciara is saying, look, separation of source is critical to make sure we end up with single polymers for dealing for recycling to deliver the quality that's necessary. So whether you're a designer or whether you're a producer, or whether you're actually the retailer or the business in store, doing the right thing to actually make sure that that is recyclable in the first place, and then segregating the waste at source is critical. If it isn't, then it has additional costs when it comes to separation and sink and float systems. And at the end of the day, the customer from the recycling centre wants to make sure the quality of the material, they are dealing with single polymers and they have material data sheets to back that up, so that there can be consistency of production as well. Because the last thing that wants to happen is that you have a downtime in a production system where the quality of the recyclables coming back isn't good enough. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what Ciara and their business is doing is actually closing the loop and providing the ultimate circular economy for us all in terms of the reuse of the materials that are scarce out there. So we'll just open it up to the floor for a minute if there's any particular questions anybody would like to ask. While you're thinking and on that, just to let you know, we will be sharing the presentations and we'll follow up with that in an email to everybody. So I'm just checking the chat line. There's nothing there and there's nothing in on the Q&A. So without further ado, I'd like to thank all the speakers today. Ursula Denison from Germany, Brian Walsh, our in-house man himself, Shan Price from Ballygown and Britvic, and Ciara Carolan from ADN Materials. Muile Buíochas, and thank you all very much for your contributions, really worthwhile, and looking forward to seeing you all at the next one. Many thanks.